Naomi Carter pulled up the collar of her coat as the icy wind of Washington, D.C. swept through the empty parking lot. She had just left the FBI headquarters after a long day dealing with a major corruption case within the police force, a deep-rooted issue she had been determined to dismantle since taking the director's seat. The streetlights cast a dim glow on her black Chevrolet Tahoe as she unlocked the door and slipped inside, exhaling a tired sigh. Finally, she could head home after nearly 16 hours of nonstop work. The late-night streets were quiet, the neon signs reflecting off the damp pavement from an earlier rain. The clock on her dashboard flashed 11:47 p.m. Naomi turned onto a less busy road when suddenly red and blue lights flared up behind her. A short burst of a siren followed. She frowned, glancing in her rearview mirror. A patrol car was right on her tail, signaling her to pull over. Naomi took a deep breath, keeping herself composed. She knew for a fact she hadn't broken any traffic laws. No speeding, no broken lights, no reason to be stopped. But experience had taught her that sometimes the reason didn't matter. Her skin color did. She pulled over, turned off the engine, and placed both hands on the steering wheel. As the patrol car's doors swung open, two figures stepped out, their flashlights cutting through the darkness and shining into her car. A familiar tension crept up her spine. Naomi braced herself. She had witnessed situations like this far too many times, but this time she wasn't just a bystander. She was the one in the crosshairs. Naomi Carter kept her hands firmly on the steering wheel, her heartbeat steady, but her mind racing. She had been in high-stakes situations before: hostage negotiations, counter-terrorism operations, takedowns of criminal organizations. But there was something uniquely dangerous about this moment. It wasn't just about her job or the badge she carried. It was about being a black woman alone on a dark road with two police officers approaching her vehicle for no apparent reason. The first officer, a tall man with a buzz cut and a rigid posture, tapped on her window with his flashlight. The beam flickered across her face, lingering a little too long. The second officer, broader with a smug expression, stood a few feet behind, hand resting on his holstered gun. Naomi knew that stance. It was the stance of someone looking for an excuse to escalate. Rolling down her window just enough to communicate, she kept her voice even. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" The buzz-cut officer smirked. "License and registration." Naomi didn't move. "I'd be happy to comply if you tell me why I was pulled over." A beat of silence. The second officer took a step closer, shifting his weight. The air between them thickened with an unspoken challenge. Buzzcut leaned in, his breath fogging the cold air. "Ma'am, when an officer asks for your ID, you hand it over. Or do we have a problem here?" Naomi kept her hands visible. She could feel the tension crackling like static electricity. "I'm Director Naomi Carter of the FBI," she stated clearly, enunciating each word. "I'd still like to know why I was stopped." That should have ended it. That name alone should have made them back off. But instead, something flickered in the officer's eyes, something ugly. He chuckled, shaking his head. "FBI, huh? Got a badge to prove it?" Naomi exhaled slowly, reaching toward the inside pocket of her coat with deliberate care. "I'm retrieving my credentials," she said firmly, her every move controlled. Before she could even pull it out, the second officer's voice cut through the night. "Hands where I can see them! Now!" Naomi froze, fingers inches from her badge. She could feel the shift, the moment where authority turned into aggression, the moment where restraint could mean the difference between life and death. A car passed by slowly, its headlights illuminating the scene for just a second. Naomi caught the silhouette of a person in the driver's seat, eyes wide. A witness. She made a decision. Still moving slowly, she withdrew her hand, empty, and placed it back on the steering wheel. "Officers," she said, her voice unwavering, "you are making a mistake." Buzzcut scoffed, but before he could respond, the distant hum of a phone notification broke the silence. From the sidewalk, the witness had raised their phone, camera light blinking. They were recording. The balance of power shifted in an instant. The officers stiffened. Naomi saw the hesitation in their eyes, the weight of accountability settling in. Now it was their move, and she was watching. The video spread like wildfire. Within hours, it was circulating across social media, news stations, and internal law enforcement channels. The footage was damning, Two officers escalating a routine stop into a dangerous confrontation, their hostility evident despite Naomi Carter's calm and measured responses. By morning, her phone was inundated with calls, journalists hungry for a statement, politicians eager to get ahead of the scandal, and her own FBI colleagues demanding to know what had happened. Naomi stood in front of her office window, staring down at the city below. Brinkhaven had always been a battlefield. She had fought organized crime, domestic terrorism, and corruption within its walls. But this was different. This wasn't some faceless enemy lurking in the shadows. It was right there, in uniform, wielding power with impunity. A sharp knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she said, already knowing who it was. Special Agent Michael Graves stepped inside, his expression tight. He had been with the Bureau for 15 years and had seen his fair share of corruption, but even he looked rattled. "Director, the mayor just issued a statement. He's calling for a full investigation into the officers involved," Graves reported. "Internal Affairs is scrambling, the department is under fire, and people want answers." Naomi folded her arms. "And what's the police commissioner saying?" Graves hesitated. He's trying to downplay it, claimed it was a misunderstanding and that the officers felt threatened. Naomi let out a humorless laugh. "Threatened? By what?" "A woman sitting in her car, stating her credentials?" Graves sighed. "They're banking on the usual tactics, delaying the process, discrediting you if necessary. But the video's working against them. Public pressure is mounting. We've even got members of Congress weighing in." Naomi turned to face him fully. "Then we push harder. I want those officers suspended immediately, and I want full transparency on this investigation. No backroom deals, no buried reports. We expose this for what it is." Graves nodded. "Understood." As he turned to leave, Naomi called after him. "Michael, find out who recorded that video. I want to speak with them personally." Later that evening, Naomi sat across from the young woman who had captured the footage. Maya Brooks, a college student, still looked shaken but resolute. "I just knew I had to do something," Maya said, gripping her phone. "I've seen cases like this before, too many times. But this time I was there. I couldn't just drive away." Naomi leaned forward, her voice steady. "You did the right thing. And because of you, the truth is out." Maya exhaled, tension easing from her shoulders. "Do you really think anything will change?" Naomi met her gaze, determination burning in her eyes. "I don't just think so. I'll make sure of it." Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, a reminder of the fight ahead. But Naomi Carter was ready. She had spent her life taking down powerful adversaries. This time, the system itself was in her crosshairs. The battle begins. The morning after her meeting with Maya Brooks, Naomi Carter walked into FBI headquarters with a new kind of fire in her veins. The weight of the previous night still clung to her. Maya's voice, raw with both fear and determination, echoed in her mind. "Do you really think anything will change?" The question wasn't just rhetorical, it was a challenge. One Naomi intended to meet head on. Her office phone rang before she could sit down. It was Special Agent Michael Graves. "Director, you need to see this," he said, his voice unusually tense. "Turn on Channel 7. Naomi grabbed the remote and switched on the television. The news anchor's face was grave. Newly surfaced footage suggests that the two officers who pulled over FBI Director Naomi Carter may have falsified reports in prior cases. Several victims have come forward, alleging wrongful arrests, racial profiling, and even excessive force. Internal Affairs has launched an expanded investigation, but the police union is pushing back, calling the accusations an attack on law enforcement. Naomi clenched her jaw. An attack on law enforcement? No, this was an attack on corruption. And the system was already trying to protect itself. A knock at her door signaled Graves' arrival. He entered, setting a thick folder on her desk. "The rabbit hole goes deeper than we thought," he said, his tone grim. "Detectives Ryan Cole and Mark Sanders, the officers from your stop, have a history. At least a dozen complaints against them, but nothing ever stuck. Every time an investigation started, it got buried under insufficient evidence." Naomi flipped open the file. Photos, testimonies, internal memos, pieces of a puzzle showing just how much rot had festered within Brinkhaven's police department. "They have protectors," she muttered. Graves nodded. "And not just within the department. We found connections to city officials, even a judge who dismissed multiple cases tied to them." This isn't just about two bad cops. It's an entire network. Naomi exhaled slowly, calculating her next move. If this was bigger than just Cole and Sanders, she couldn't afford to play it safe. Schedule a meeting with the U.S. Attorney's Office, she ordered, and get our best investigators on this. If they think they can intimidate us into backing down, they're dead wrong. Graves hesitated. There's one more thing. Naomi lifted an eyebrow. Sanders lawyered up, Graves said, and not just any lawyer, Vincent Holloway. Naomi's stomach turned. Holloway was notorious, a high-profile defense attorney with deep political ties and a reputation for making problems disappear. If he was involved, it meant the people backing Sanders and Cole weren't just scared, they were willing to fight dirty. Then we make sure they have nowhere to hide, Naomi said, standing tall. As Graves left to set things in motion, Naomi stared at the city skyline through her window. Brinkhaven was a battlefield, and the war for justice had just begun. If they wanted a fight, they'd get one. The pressure rises. Naomi Carter knew the moment she stepped into her office that morning that the storm was intensifying. The headlines were everywhere. News channels, social media, even major newspapers had picked up the story. FBI director versus corrupt cops. Brinkhaven scandal unfolds. Some called her a hero. Others accused her of waging a war on law enforcement. The police union released a statement condemning the investigation as a politically motivated witch hunt. But Naomi didn't care about politics. She cared about justice. Her phone buzzed. It was an encrypted message from Special Agent Michael Graves. Sanders flipped. We have a meeting in an hour. Naomi's pulse quickened. She had expected resistance, denials, even attempts to discredit her. But this, if Mark Sanders was turning on his own, it meant he was either terrified or had something bigger to gain. Either way, she needed to be ready. An hour later, in a secured interrogation room, Sanders sat across from her, his lawyer Vincent Holloway by his side. The once arrogant detective looked different now, sweat on his brow, hands fidgeting. He was cracking. I'm not going down for this alone, Sanders muttered. Cole and I, yeah, we did things, but we had orders. You think this stops with us? You have no idea who you're up against. Naomi leaned forward. Then tell me. Holloway cut in, smirking. My client is willing to cooperate for a deal. Naomi met his gaze, unflinching. The battle was far from over, but this was a crack in the foundation, and she was ready to bring the whole damn structure down. Lessons from the Brinkhaven scandal. The story of Naomi Carter's fight against corruption in Brinkhaven serves as a powerful reminder that justice is not automatic. It requires courage, persistence, and an unwavering commitment to truth. In a world where power is often abused, standing up against injustice can feel like an uphill battle. But change begins when individuals refuse to stay silent. One key lesson from Naomi's struggle is the importance of accountability. No one should be above the law, especially those entrusted to uphold it. Transparency and oversight are essential in any system of power. Additionally, her story highlights the strength of integrity. Even when faced with threats and pressure, staying true to one's principles can expose wrongdoing and create lasting change. In today's world, we must be vigilant, question authority when necessary, and support those who fight for justice. Change happens when people demand it and have the courage to act.